Johanna's computer, yeah?
You will be speaking second, so I'll give you a mic. And whoever's speaking third, I'm guessing.
And I'm going to take one microphone Okay, Johanna, she's going to do a brief and then a brief for me, really brief, very short.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thrilled to see so many people here, and I'm thrilled to see so many new faces, people that haven't graced our doors in a while or perhaps before, and a lot of old friends also. So I want to thank you all. For those of you who aren't aware, we do a speaker series. We're opportunistic, so when Trevor calls and asks, we go, yep, we'll do it. And so we're just excited to bring design and architecture, landscape architecture to Vancouver, and to have people have a great dialogue. So you guys have been doing a really good job dialoguing already. And this should be a very exciting evening. I want to thank the Inform staff who always pull this off so incredibly effortlessly. There are times we do one a week, and it is a lot to move all the furniture, store the chairs, put them back out, put the furniture out, do reverse, go back and forth and everything. So they're an amazing team, and they're really super, and we all believe that this is important. So I thank you for also taking your time and thinking it's important. I would like to introduce
Thank you, Nancy.
I'd like to introduce the moderator. Are you the moderator this evening? The moderator this evening. The moderator. Trevor Boddy, writer extraordinaire, curator. I don't know what else you do.
Troublemaker.
Troublemaker, always. That's the good part. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not a moderator, I'm a immoderator. I'm not going to say much tonight. It's been a very busy day. Architects from across the country are meeting downtown. And so I gave a talk in an overheated convention room. So I'm at half capacity plus the pollen, so I'm not going to say much. This is an institution. The Inform book launches have changed the city because there's an opportunity regularly for architects and designers and the public of design to come together. And most cities don't have anything like this, and it's entirely due to the patronage of Nancy and Nils that we have this golden opportunity. This is also a golden opportunity because this is a rare chance to see some of the top architects in Canada at the top of the form produce a book which I think will be around for decades. A very, very serious and substantive book on housing. Platform.MIDDLE is, if you've seen it, it's in a slipcase. It's got multi-sections, etc. It covers the politics, sociology of housing, finance, layouts, and then demonstrates it with some of their work. So it's a great, great honor for me to introduce our three keynote architects tonight. The way that evening will transpire is first Johanna Hurme from 546-8796 in Winnipeg will set up the book project, the symposium at the Illinois Institute of Technology that started it. Then we'll invite another participant like me at that event, Marianne Amodio from here in Vancouver, one of our most progressive and interesting architectural practices. She'll be speaking, but her partner, Radulovic, is here tonight, and it's really an effort of all of us. And then finally, Sasa Radulovic from the same firm in Winnipeg will close the evening and share some of the work. So thank you all for coming. These are not just, these are friends, and they're friends and subjects. And I often befriend the architects I admire most. I've had this amazing opportunity to write about Douglas Cardinal, Clifford Greens, you name it. And all of them have become friends because I admire their work and we have something to talk about. And this is certainly true of Johanna and Sasa. I knew them briefly as students. I came back to Winnipeg and they started to rise while working for other firms. They very cleverly and early set up their own firm. They'll tell you the story of the number. It's not the phone number, by the way. Many of us phoned that number trying to get a hold of them. It was the corporate registration number, 546-8796. The number you get from the business branch when you're making a new business. Why not? Perfect. Johanna Hurme will speak first. It's a great story. She came from Finland on exchange to a small town in Manitoba, and there's something, I guess she didn't come for the weather because it was very Finnish weather, but something happened and she got to like Canada and has been here more or less ever since. She studied, like Sasa, at the University of Manitoba, as did Marianne as well.
And Harley.
And Harley, all four, about the same vintage. The firm is amazing because it's a firm of principles and ideas. And not that often do you get both dedications stretching through an entire career. The book could only be written out of principles and ideas, and you'll see that in the course of the evening. So I don't think I need to belabor this. First I'll ask Johanna to come up and start things off.
Slow it down.
Okay. There we go. Is that good?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for coming. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to have a full house. It's the second time I think we're at Inform, and last time was lovely, so I'm hoping that we can keep this one also entertaining. But super happy to be here, of course, with Trevor. It's an honor, always an honor, and with fellow architect Marianne, who has inspired us over the years, and again, together with Harley, of course, to do what we do. So quick story on the book, since that's why we're here. Platform Middle, titled so because we're talking about mid-scale housing, and architecture for housing the 99%, because this is everything that's not the private house, and it's the multifamily that we're trying to cover. But this has been a 4-year sort of labor of love. Didn't know when we ventured onto it to be that, but certainly books apparently take time, so I had no idea. Started, as Trevor mentioned, at the Illinois Institute of Technology, where Sasha and I were invited to be the Morgenstern Chairs for a term. So an honorary teaching position there, and then also the then Dean Michelangelo Sabatino, fellow Canadian, asked if we wanted to run a housing symposium. And housing was, again, really talked about already, highly debated. The crisis was hitting us all, and so we invited these lovely participants. Now it's not very sharp, but so I'm not sure if you can read any of the names. They're written on the bottom there as well. But developers, housing architects, policymakers, and sort of specialists like Trevor and others, critics and so on, from across the sort of Canada and the US, and so that we could really have a wholesome conversation about what is it that we can as architects do about the housing crisis. Our, again, track is fairly limited the way that it is, but what that resulted is then Michelangelo asking us to put together a symposium backlit at the end of it, sort of to gather the findings and what we all discussed, and to be able to share that with his academic community. And as we got on to that task, of course, somehow, you know, that was all going well, and we were going to have it wrapped up by the end of the summer, and then realized that, shoot, we have so much more to say about this topic, having worked ourselves for the past, it says somewhere around 6,000 at the end of it, but having touched sort of nearly 7,000 housing suites in our time in operation, you know, 17 years, give or take. That really dates me, it's horrible to say, but anyway, that there was a lot that we actually could contribute, and the idea is that this book then is not only sort of what we discovered together and were inspired by our colleagues, but it's also what we have learned along the way. And so the way that it breaks out is that the first book, Platform Middle, is simply the contents of the symposium. It talks about all of the discussions that we have, or actually transcribes them specifically. And then we have some calls to action for all our fellow architects on what we can do in order to improve the end outcome for the end user. Platform macro, we realized that we really have to talk about the issues that we can't traditionally touch as architects. So finance, politics, zoning, regulation, all of that goes into it actually dictates a lot of what we produce, and even formally so. So that if you're engaged in housing architecture, you have to know that stuff before you get into the design business. And then platform micro is the sort of heftiest section of our side of the production, which is the design issues that we do and can affect and should affect positively once we get into it. And there's certain tricks of the trade that we've learned over our past decade and a half that we simply wanted to pass on to the younger generation, to the students, and everybody who can benefit from that, so that they wouldn't have to go through the pain of learning that from the get-go. And then finally, platform modeling, sort of cutely, the 4 M's here, but regardless, that's the catalog of the housing projects. I think there's 22 or 24 of them there, so that you can reference back when an issue is talked about and see how that particular one got solved. So that's kind of the layout of the land. I will, in terms of introduction, just talk a little bit about the issues and our discoveries about housing in general. So, one could argue again that housing is sort of most mundane of the architectural typologies that's out there. It's not, terribly sort of sexy section of architecture, but we also think that it's the one that touches the most people going about their everyday lives, so it's an important one. And then, of course, in North America in particular, we lack this middle scale housing. We do towers pretty well, we do the individual houses well, and most people know how to live in those two modes. But we don't typically do well is the mid-scale. And there are several reasons for that, at least in our opinion, we've come to. And one of them, of course, is sort of there's economic impact, there's environmental impact, there's social impact, and one of the big things, of course, is that we live large in this part of the world. 4 times the footprint of our average sort of Asian counterpart, twice as much space we occupy per person as our European fellow citizens and so forth. So that's a big issue, and it highlights how much responsibility we have as architects to think about different modes for the future. And of course, environmentally, the facts that almost 40% of the CO2 emissions come from buildings, a third of the energy production is related to buildings. So we have this huge responsibility to do something about it. Another key reason is continually climbing housing prices is the commodification of housing. And you, of course, know in Vancouver this particularly well. I'm not here to educate you about that, but in Canada, it's largely due to the deregulation in the early 70s that rewarded ownership to speculation and made housing a commodity and investment vehicle that could be traded and so forth. And today, of course, $270 trillion is the value of global real estate, and 75% of that is in the residential market. So there's very little that architects per se in their little commissions can do about that factor. And furthermore, over 10% of Canadians live in core housing need. This is, I'm sure, quite a bit higher in Vancouver. And nearly 30% of both Canadian and American households are cost burdened, so meaning that they spend more than 30% of their income on shelter. But to me, what the biggest issue is by far is that out of the entire housing stock in both Canada and the US, a small fraction is not produced by the private sector. So the share of public housing on the entire entire housing stock in the US is less than 1%, and in Canada currently about 3.5%. And so if we then look at countries where public housing for the lower income is handled better, we look at Northern Europe where those numbers in the mid-30s. And so somehow we keep doing this the same way. We're currently doing it the same. Let's get the private sector involved. Let's get them to fix the problem. Well, they're not going to behave in a way that is charitable because they run businesses. It's not for them to be blamed, but that's just how our framework is set up. And so it's very little that, we can do that would drastically and dramatically change this equation unless we fix this part. Secondly, what creates form of housing, I think, and our conclusion is that there's three factors. One is, again, everything's driven by private profits, so that gives you a certain form. We have the requirement for 2 exits beyond anywhere else in the world. Out of like two-story buildings, we require 2 exits. So it creates double-loaded corridor, not through units and so forth. And then thirdly, we don't have any public policy that dictates quality for the end user. Compared to, let's say, in Australia, New South Wales has a flat design code, has had it for 20-some years, and it's been renewed in 2015, that actually tells you how much sunlight should hit the back of the unit, and things like that. And so we're not, as architects and designers, bound by anything, and developers are not bound by anything to create that inequality. So that's the third kind of strike against us. And then, of course, then everything gets dictated by how much perimeter you have, how much access to light, how many units can you squeeze in, and so on. And that's the formula. On a softer side of things, I don't think we know how to live communally or how to share public outdoor space together. You know, and this is coming from childhood, but this is sort of the way that I grew up, between the buildings, between the housing complexes that had apartments and families would live in for life. Seniors would sit and watch kids play. There was built-in security from that. I'm there, the little skier, number 3, it's skiing competition. So there was a whole community that existed on the yard and in between the buildings, and not in the spaces that architects were commissioned to build, but just something that people value as part of the housing complex. And I've become to believe that that is one of the key ingredients that's missing. And while we don't have bigger adoption of multifamily as a sort of lifelong, age-in-place kind of scenario, you know, and here's my first place that I lived in Winnipeg. And so you can see what's, you know, in the place of the swing sets and benches and play structures is a parking lot and a garbage enclosure. And that's what we do as Canadians in that in-between space. Again, the picture on the right is of Helsinki. And somehow it is this idea that you need a special trip to go to the park. And it's an activity, let's go to the park. As opposed to encountering that in everyday life and in between buildings and a network of public spaces that occurs everywhere. So those are some of the thoughts that we've been trying to frame the conversation in this book around. None of the particular diagrams, and God, there's probably 250 diagrams at least in this book of different scenarios that are particularly groundbreaking. But it is our hope that once we put them together in one place, that it does hopefully help someone else to further the conversation, and it's not work that's complete by any means. It's what we've learned to date and hope to share with all of you. And so that's the purpose of the book. Thank you so much. Marianne?
Thank you, Johanna. In my introduction, I neglected to mention a couple things. Johanna's teaching regularly at Cornell this fall at Daniels in Toronto. She's a former president of the Chamber of Commerce of the City of Winnipeg. How many architects take that kind of civic leadership role? And I think we need more doing that. And she's now on the board of the World Architecture Institute of Canada. Marianne is, like me, a native of Edmonton and studied at the University of Manitoba. And then she and Harley chose to build her practice here. I think it's one of those amazing practices that gets better and better and better, as you'll see in a minute. So, Marianne, take it away.
Thank you. Oh, Trevor's going to turn this off.
Sherry, you want this one? Can I check it? I can hold it for you.
Oh, you're so nice. All right. Let's do the technical issues first. Okay. I think that this is not going to work. It's too close to the speaker. Okay, I'm just going to move this out of the way. It's going to fall.
I got it.
Thanks, Sasha.
gotta hold it.
I could probably do without it. It's working. The red light apparently is working. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for your patience. And thank you to Sasa and Johanna for having me here today. I really want to congratulate them on this beautiful series of books, the rigor of their commitment to this issue, and for their support as friends and colleagues. We first met at the University of Manitoba in 1995. They were in Harley's class. I was a year ahead. We're honored to be here with them today. So it was 2019 when Sasa and Johanna invited me to attend the Platform.MIDDLE Symposium at the IIT in Chicago. At that time, we had just begun design work on several projects that champion the right to affordable and beautiful housing in the realm of the missing middle. Back then, it wasn't called the missing middle, but it is now. We established design principles that we felt crucial to this practice, and in the past 5 years, we've been able to see these projects come to fruition. So this short talk today is really an opportunity for us to reflect on how our ideals have transferred into reality. So the focus of our work has been in service of providing a solution to a problem, namely the very well-documented housing affordability crisis, as well as a crisis of community, or as many philosophers refer to it as a kind of cult of individualism that's resulted in a cultural fragmentation. This has left many people without context to feel significant, without a place in a connecting system, and with a feeling of alienation from structures of family and community. We felt that densification, in a good way, one that creates community through sharing, that relies on personal interaction, and values joy and beauty and belonging, could help to solve these problems. So we appropriated this term from psychology, social density, which means both the density in the area in terms of the number of people and the number of interpersonal reactions that are likely to happen in a set space. So this is essentially a qualitative and quantitative dialectic, and lately I like to say that we try to live between this tension between beauty and affordability. For us, the creation of practical works that are soulful are mutually inclusive. So the essential problem in architecture, of course, is how to take these ideas to form. So we began to establish principles that would allow us to execute the ideas of social density in form and purpose, designing for greater communal experience, weaving opportunities for sociability at all scales, designing efficient and beautiful plans, rethinking industry design standards, and questioning cultural norms about what makes home.
This is not it.
So the second essential problem of architecture is knowing whether your ideas actually work. It's like a grand, kind of really expensive experiment. In Chicago in 2019, Tomo, this project here, was a paper project. It had a lot of ideas around it on how to create community through sharing, and it was just completed this last year. So Tomo is a 14,000 square foot, 12-unit passive house project with one lock-off unit, and it was in the place of a single-family dwelling, and it was rezoned under what was then a policy called the Affordable Housing Choices Policy, from single-family dwelling to multi-family dwelling. So this is a photo of it just recently completed. And Tomo's a missing middle project in all ways. We wanted, context is between it's on a busy arterial street, Main Street. It's between a 4-story apartment building and a single-family dwelling to the south. So that we really wanted to create a typology that fit between these two building types that's so common in Vancouver. So we scaled the roof line to reflect the context. We were really sensitive to the context at that time. Back in 2017, when we started this project, there was a lot of sensitivity about density. Now it looks small to me. I think we could have gone quite a bit bigger. So the singular roof form that encompasses this partie is a response to the traditional gable architecture of the surrounding single-family neighborhood, as well as an outward expression of the co-housing community called Our Urban Village. It's meant to represent 12 families under one roof. So that big move really was about connoting what this intentional community was trying to evoke. So it's also a bit of a play on the Vancouver special with the brick base and the gable form. So the architectural design here strives to make outward connections to the surrounding neighborhood. The corner there of Ontario Place in Maine becomes a welcoming space for the community to gather, with a common house purposefully placed adjacent to it. The inclusion of stoops on the Ontario Street side are intended to invite interaction on the quieter street. And the main residential entrance marks arrival from the busy main street. Generous glazing creates social transparency in and out, and there's a public and private interface that we really tried to accentuate. Semi-private spaces encourage residents to linger. Finding that balance between what's too private and what's too public in a co-sharing and co-living environment was really important. So Tomo, it's also an everyday building. It's designed with affordability and longevity at the forefront. It's modest in materiality and form, and it's not snobbish. We really considered it an architecture for everyone. So you can really see the what we call the sharing partie here. This is an L-shaped partie that's where we scribe the building around an exterior courtyard. And this sort of makes use of the idea of the backyard, so everyone has access to this shared common space. And it allows for this for kind of a scaling down with the exterior corridor. So everyone has access to that shared courtyard space through the exterior courtyard. The south-facing courtyard is, even though it's small, it's hugely useful, and it provides a sun-filled social space for all residents. And the common house just beyond the big staircase there connects the courtyard to Main Street. These generous walkways are overscaled. We consider them social stairs and social walkways. And you'll see in some images coming up how the residents have co-opted them into useful space. The vibrant cladding scheme, we like to call this project a bit of a mullet. The public-facing side is a bit more conservative, and the more private side is a bit more fun, reflective of an Emily Carr painting, and a bit more dynamic. We really believe in the power of color as a firm, and to spark joy and create delight. So again, robust materials ensure longevity and low maintenance over time. So these are some more recent slides. We haven't had professional photos taken yet, but this is just showing some of the quality of the interior spaces, where the materiality and finish quality reflects the priorities of affordability and longevity. It's decidedly anti-luxury, clean, unarticulated finishes that allow the space to feel open and clear, so the user can start to have ownership over the space. That's something that we really prioritize in our work, not over-designing, so that we can give choice to people in small spaces. All units in the building are through units. This allows for windows on both sides and cross-ventilation through the units. And some of these photos, we just love seeing how they're using the space. You can see that in that third image at the top, the kids are stringing a piñata through the courtyard. You can see how they're starting to plant plants. They pull lights into the entryway. And the common house is really a place of a microcosm of the building for strong social engagement and community interaction. So the next project that was on the boards back in 2019 was this project. This is our Union Street project. And again, it was in drawing form there, and it's now completed. Union Street, it's on Union in Strathcona, which is one of the oldest neighborhoods in Vancouver. And the existing home on the site was built in 1898, and it played a strong part in the storied history of this neighborhood, like murderers, gamblers. There was all kinds of scandal around this house. And also everyone knew it. It's sited very oddly. It's shifted to the side. There's a very large side yard, and it's also elevated. So everyone in the neighborhood knew this building. They all knew it before we even started working on it, and they called it the Big House. And it also happens to be on the busiest bicycle way in Vancouver. So the zoning allowed for bonus density to construct an infill building in exchange for the retention of this character building. This is a policy of the City of Vancouver that actually works really well. We find in general that the retention of heritage buildings is generally accepted by most people as a acceptable trade-off for densification. So we have a number of heritage retention projects where it sort of provides people with a soft place to land. So these densification policies remain one of the few that are generally unopposed, and this community in particular valued socioeconomic diversity, welcomes density that improves affordability, and also embraced a bit of weirdness. So the prime need was to create a home for the owner and her mother to co-live and age in place, supported by community, catalyzed through the densification of the site. The heritage home was converted into 2 units, one fully accessible from grade, and a 3-unit infill building was added to the rear of the site. So architectonically, the desire was to activate interaction within and between the 2 buildings. The partie of the infill was conceived as a series of individual houses coming together to form a shared community. And the skew of the main gables of the infill was purposeful. Finally, it was important to the owner to create an expressive and sculptural piece of new architecture alongside a modern and highly detailed restoration. Both endeavors were seen as art by this owner. The materiality of the project still employs modest, robust, and no-nonsense finishes for longevity and contextual fit, while the nature of both the modern and historical construction required a great craft by our friend Reese Terrace, who acted as a general contractor. So the aspirations of the project provided a platform to develop our principles of social density, the creation of architecture as a methodology for catalyzing community, as a means of artful expression, and as a modality of living that is multi-generational, interactive, and sociable. So you can see some of the views there. That's me and Lindsay. She was a project architect on it, sort of interacting in that courtyard space. That picture that's Dinka, Mira's mom on the far right, a view from Dinka's suite in the heritage home. So these principles were really tested in the days of COVID when physical distancing was still required. The planning of the buildings allowed the owner, her mother, the residents, and invited guests to interact safely and provided a lot of social connection at the time of isolation. The social density experiment has continued in post-pandemic times with almost constant congregation here, artist exhibits, political gatherings, and dining events. So we continue to test these principles in a lot of our other built works over the last few years, and we're working to ensure that our projects reflects the values inherent in social density. And here's a few more to look at while I say thank you again to Trevor, Sasa, and Johanna, and for the fun folks at Inform and to all of you this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Marianne. I urge you all, if you're looking for a place to go for a bike ride, go down South Main to 42nd, take a look at Tomo, and then head out, go past the Portuguese bakery, and get an egg tart, and then go up Union to see these, and I think you'll see why MA+HG is one of the rising stars in our architectural culture in the city. Finally, our last speaker tonight will be Sasa Radulovic. Argain, he left the former Yugoslavia, came here, has been an amazing Roman candle of a personality, creator, and advocate. I have to give personal thanks. Their son Indy is here with them, And something I really believe in is that we should bring our children to where we are. And so on. I have some of my Carleton students are here, and they'll remember taking my daughter to studio prints in a Snuggly, and I think it's nothing but good for parents and children. So Indy is here tonight. You never guess if he's wearing black. But Sasha, take it away.
Thanks, Trevor. One thing that Trevor did very well is made us cut slides, and I think I've lost about 75% of my slides, and I still have too many, so I have to speed through this because I think we're running out of time. All right, come here. So, the part that I'm sort of tasked with taking you through is a toolkit. It's one of the books, or two of the books that deal directly with tools and ideas that we think are measurable and are employable and are transferable elsewhere. So the toolkit is divided into 4, call it chapters or zones. It was the actual idea of organizing this entire book around something that we felt through our 16 or 17 years of existence was rather difficult. So we've sort of structured it through 4 chapters of critical opportunism, adaptability, resilience, between, and livability, all about qualities and approaches we found that work in the context of multifamily housing, and then we take that to a finer grain to a series of different sort of very much matter of fact objectives and the results. So due to cutting of the slides, I'm only going to touch on one project. It's called the Pump House in Winnipeg, and it's a mixed use, sort of touches on most of the things we talk about in the books. It's a very good example. Many projects kind of meander through different chapters, tap into different ideas and enrich the next generation of projects that comes out of the office. So the Pump House itself, we think, touches, and the way it's actually positioned in the book touches on all 4 of the toolkit chapters. It was an old ruined building that had seen, I think, 14 attempts in 17 years, or 17 attempts in 14 years to be redeveloped. The back end of the city. It was built in the early 1900s to provide water to hydrants throughout the city. And so we learned the city is going to give it one more shot, and we, without having a client, sort of asked the city. In Winnipeg is, I think, different than when we were living in Vancouver, because we knew who actually had the keys in the city to let us into the building. So they gave us the keys, we went in, discovered one thing that, because there was no electricity in the building, we think, and it was always dark, was never discovered by others prior to us, is there's significant residual structural capacity inside the building because it has 2 gantry cranes that were there to move the pumps that again supply the water hydrants to the buildings. And so we called our structural engineer, asked him, does that not mean that the building can support at least some program inside? And that was the first time that somebody tried that for the building. So that made the building possible itself. Now, the other thing that was interesting about the building site, it came with 2 relatively small parcels on either end, one about 40 feet deep, another one 100, so we all know how to build in 100 foot by 100 foot sites, but the 40 foot one was a challenge. So one of the things that, again, we've developed, and this is all on our own volition, was a thought on how to build a building in front of the old pump house on a 40-foot lot and make that commercially viable. So as we did that, we approached a couple of our existing clients and said, we think there's a project here. We did a full financial pro forma for a project and said, it appears that it actually cash flows. Why don't you take a look at it? It took about a year to buy this property from the city in 2015, and the project just got completed this Christmas, or last Christmas. So in a nutshell, it's very similar to what you saw initially. There's a full floor of commercial space inside the heritage building, with the pumps all exposed, flanked or bookended by 2 apartment blocks on elevated stilts. So this takes me, I guess, to conclude, the idea of critical opportunism is sort of understanding where the opportunities are for us as architects. They don't necessarily need to be sitting there and waiting for clients to call. We can find the projects, or we can see the projects perhaps earlier than others and possibly make them actually happen. So as I move to the next level, the idea of adaptability and resilience, it's hard to see on the right-hand side is all the little fine-grained issues that the books cover. Again, Pampo's touches on the ones that are highlighted in yellow. We had a client who, while waiting for the permits for the other buildings, he was not afraid of swinging a hammer, and actually he decided he's going to build the interiors by himself, hired 3 or 4 people from Kijiji. We have Kijiji in Vancouver. And said, okay, here's my crew, let's go. And so without the permits or anything like that. So we developed an entire structural or tectonic, if you wish, system consisting of structural steel studs, as you can see here, spaced at about 2 feet, and therefore being able to be installed by unskilled labor. So there's only one connection they need to know. It was a self-tapping screw, and we printed them the full floor plate on that, and on the floor after it was constructed. They were able to do that quite precisely. So the entire building is built using a rather resilient, if you wish, rather low impact, low cost, really low cost. I think the entire interior fit up was $55 a square foot, including mechanical and electrical systems. And it had to do, because it had very little, one, overhead, and 2, very little skilled labor required for the project that we designed within the bones of the building. So all the floors are suspended on the blue beams that are supporting gantry cranes. So we're supporting these gantry cranes, and the studs span between that and bottom trusses. And by spacing them 2 feet apart, we're able to go to 1/4-inch glass, as your typical 1/2-inch glass that you see in any other commercial project. And with that, we'd only reduce the amount of glass in half, so it could be done by unskilled labor or semi-skilled labor, if you wish. So some of that thinking inspired the thinking in the apartment buildings, where we went back 100 years to the technology of mill deck buildings that you see in Vancouver as well. Most, if not all, warehouse buildings in Winnipeg were done with mill deck, which is basically 2x4s or 2x6s nailed together to create a composite floor. And so that became, again, going back to the history, understanding of what to tap into became the technology used to build the buildings. Now, Johanna spoke a bit about the building in between, understanding of spaces that are framed by the buildings, and we do commonly believe that we've forgotten about how to build cities. We build buildings, we build projects onto their own, but we rarely build cities. So one of our mantras is trying to weave the city through the project and trying to weave the project into the city. So this quick little thing explains how the sequence of entries and sequence of spaces actually happens on all sides of the site. All the residents are able to enter their building through the heritage building, so they're always feeling part and parcel of the complex and the history of the complex itself as they get to the elevators, and the commercial and office entrances are obviously off the street, trying to animate whatever street light we have in Winnipeg. A lot of the spaces in between buildings are placeholders as we hope the intensity of use, rather than density, but intensity of use develops and gets stronger over time. And you can see that every side of the building, every side of the complex is considered to be a place for people on their feet. Now there's a lot of little tricks that, on one hand, it's very hard to sort of decide, and I'm not sure that the book does it in one way, but there's multiple ways of organizing the topic matter. There's a lot of, if you want to call them tricks of trade, or a lot of ways of saving money on one side of the project in order to invest in another, doing that at the same time in order to increase the livability, potentially reducing the amount of built form in order to open up views, to open up double aspect units and so on. So one of the tricks that this building uses on both sides, the double loaded and single loaded side, is the skip stop corridor. I don't think it's allowed in BC. It's definitely not permitted in Manitoba. So I went through a rigorous code reinterpretations for that in order to make it. But what that does is create spaces that are much more they're oversized. They're much more attuned to actually connecting with your neighbors. So instead of having, say, 7 doors open onto a hallway, there's 14 of them because it serves 2 floors or 3 floors in some instances. And that way, the hallways that are oversized are hoping to become a place where people can congregate. Again, the building that was occupied just in December, and this photographs were taken in January. So all the suites are, because of the nature of the open-air corridors, which again are more common here than they are in Winnipeg, are double-sided, so we have through ventilation in every one of them. The corridors are, so the building form is inverted, so the corridors are completely open air, and therefore permit windows on two sides, on the corridor side, and the hope is by introducing the oversized corridors is that the suites are going to start to find their way into that common and public space. And at the same time, on the opposite side of the building, everybody's afforded with 100% of glazing. The units that are in the skip stop configuration now allow us to do the through ventilation in all of them, so all units have windows and doors on both sides, as you can see here. In terms of the detailing and the robustness of the project, again, thinking of going back to history and how the place was built initially was an inspiration again, and the use of rudimentary materials, in this case corrugated metal and perforated corrugated metal, are the only two materials on the exterior of the building, is how the cellular, if you wish, the cellular nature of apartment block is then expanded through layers of corrugated metal mesh that create spaces of wonder and awe, we think, inside the building itself. So this project is featured throughout the book as one that touches a number of things, and this page really shows the variety of diagrams, the variety of sort of content that's available for each one of the issues that we cover in the book, and how it actually tries to organize and self-reference itself. Johanna, did you want to say something about these last two slides? Because I'm done painting. What are you saying? You want to say something about the last two slides? You don't have to get up.
Well, flip the slides. I guess it's just to conclude that really, again, the hope is for it not to be promotional for our work, but it's the idea that housing is not a commodity, but it is a human right, and we care deeply about it, and again, hope that the fellow architects do too, and we can collectively try to do our bit to solve the housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, speakers, come up here. We'll have a brief few questions or few comments, and then be on our way. That was terrific. Again, I sat on them, limited their slides, but I think you've got a real taste of the innovation and integrity of both firms and what they do. So here's the warning. If you guys want to ask questions, I'll ask very boring academic ones. So you're all motivated to put your hands up. So any comments, suggestions, whatever, right at the back there. Yeah.
Am I just yelling now?
Yeah, just yell out.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the presentation. So I just have a question, because you were mentioning earlier on that, in Helsinki you have all these middle spaces.
Yeah, hi.
You have all these middle spaces, and what I'm kind of wondering is I agree fully with the premise that, housing is a human right, but when you're saying like Helsinki in the 50s, property prices were an entirely different thing than what they are today, and even looking at Vancouver versus Winnipeg, the land prices are entirely different, and you're seeing these, tower typologies come out of that price range. How do you, as an architect, find yourself negotiating that landscape to a client who, at the end of the day, is most motivated to sell at the highest price?
Well, I can certainly start. I think it goes back to the issue that I was saying that I think is our biggest problem, is that we continue to try and solve this through the existing formula, and I don't think that's working, as you highlighted. It's an impossible equation, right? So something has to change, and fundamentally that we need to invest in public housing to be able to overcome that gap that we have where regular folks can't afford, never mind the lower income folks that can't afford a home. And so that is something that, again, when you look at the MLI program that's out there, many of you must know, working with your developers to try and produce housing. In Winnipeg, even in Winnipeg where housing is and median incomes are much lower than here, the number of affordability is $1,100 a month. Now that leaves a quarter of Winnipeggers out of the equation, so that they can't afford a house. And so when we invest in that and then don't actually require that that housing is available at that price even for more than 10 years, there's a problem, right? And so I'm advocating to all the channels that are available to me, not necessarily as a commissioned architect to do the job, but through politics, through policy making, through just talking to people and mayors and housing authorities. Remember, we'll listen, that has to change. And that we have to invest in deeply affordable housing, and that has to be public money. I don't see any other way out of it, because as you identify, the land cost alone will put us in a position where we just can't do it. And really what the micro solutions in the book are the micro things that you can do to improve the quality sort of incrementally and in moments, so that you can invest that back. But it isn't going to solve, how do we provide, 5-person family affordable housing in Vancouver.
A very good question and a very good answer. Now, Marianne, let's hear from you. I don't think their work is as Winnipeg specific as some people, including me, indicate. I do think that the principles behind the design work elsewhere. What do you think, Marianne?
Yeah, I think, let me phrase this diplomatically. Without the support, the governmental investment in housing, we're left with policies, and those policies are made by our elected officials. And our elected officials here in Vancouver, for the most part, actually we've decided that there's been a grand agreement that many acres of land is not to be touched for densification. It was just recently now that we had a change in the R11. That was a change that I was personally advocating for 15 years, and I think it came about 10 years too late. It's great that we've got densification in our single-family zones, that exclusionary zoning has been eradicated as far as I'm concerned, but we'll have to see what the uptick is in it, because I don't know if it's going to create truly affordable housing. If we were to stop right now and the world just halted, and then we all came back 100 years later and looked at what our buildings told us, because that's what we do when we go to Rome or we go to Egypt, our buildings talk about the values that we have as a people. And right now, I think that things are definitely getting better. We're going to see a big sea change in policies that were implemented about 8 or 9 years ago. All those buildings are going to start coming to fruition. But we're still tied to these ideologies about space and about what a community means and how a family is defined. I think it got worse over COVID. The cult of individualism that I was talking about really only increased. And I think the way that we're going to get to what Johanna is talking about, which is a governmental incentivized housing, which is what we saw and what we're kind of riding the coattails off, is when we all start to really look at what home means to us, what community means to us, what materiality means to us. So in the meantime, we've got some great policies that we can work off of. There are really good policies related to guidelines around design. Those are actively changing, and we do the best that we can to implement quality over quantity, right? Like, I think now more than ever, that conversation about beauty, about composition, about art, about access to light, about sharing space is so important, especially as we densify in such a rapid way.
Thanks, Marianne. A terrific answer to the question. Okay, another one. Hands up. Okay, right back there. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So, my question is, in regards to the building codes that we currently have in Canada or specific provinces, is there a specific one that you would target and say, if we could change this specific code, it would improve X? For example, the 2 exits for multi-unit buildings. Like you said, it's generally not something that you see in Europe or even Asia. And they make do. Is that something that you would say advocate for strongly versus say some other building codes that affects all of us.
Yes, we're working on with a coalition actually that's started by or led by LGA in Toronto on trying to reverse the 2-exit rule. And each one of us, I think there's probably, Sasha, 8 or 10 architectural firms that are participating in that across the country, and we're the one in Manitoba, Winnipeg, leading that, trying to get the authorities to approve single exit for small buildings. I think it would make a huge difference because you get more space. You don't have to wait. You don't have to put that into area that you can't rent or sell. And there's other ways to manage life safety equally effectively. So that would definitely be on the top of the list.
Thanks, Johanna. Jana Levitt from that firm in Toronto gave a talk today, and it was terrific, just demonstrating the momentum that when architects work together, how they can change things. There was another question over on this side. Hands up again. Right here. Yeah, go ahead.
I've attended a number of these talks, and as I've attended them, there seems to be a repeated theme of the architect as entwined with bureaucracy or government. And having seen some success on that front in Edmonton in the realm of public architecture with the city architect becoming an advocate for design for civic centers and libraries, etc. I was wondering if you could elaborate on what particular nodes within civic bureaucracies or government bureaucracies you consider the most obstinate to change, or if you could elaborate alternatively as a positive element, what institutions you'd like to see develop, or you think that architects can develop within our curriculum. What are we missing and what's in our way, essentially? What committees and what people?
Sasha, do you feel like picking up on that since you're working on Edmonton, in a couple of Edmonton projects?
I'm required to go find a hammer.
Oh, okay.
Johanna can send me to that.
Johanna can start if you like, or
Yeah, sure. I'm just trying to remember the question. I guess where are the particular pain points in standing our way? In trying to get better policies in place. Well, I think in our case, it's certainly the fact that, like Marianne was alluding to, that there are certain segments of the population that voting decision makers that have, decision makers that are catering to communities that don't want density. So that would definitely be one of the pain points that we even feel that in a really, really sprawling city like ours that desperately needs density to even survive and to make its economics work. But there's a lot of resistance because people generally just don't want change, and I'm sure that's what you're talking about. So I do find it helpful when the housing money, in this case, when purse strings are attached to policy changes. So, for example, the Housing Accelerator Fund that's been given to many cities across the country does come with strings attached, so that wiping out restrictive zoning goes a long way there. And even though I know that our mayor and the councillors are trying to find their way out of it, they are committed to, at least on paper so far, to make these changes because they otherwise will miss out on $132 million or something like that. And so that's certainly helpful. So money unfortunately talks in the framework that we have. I do find that Carl Boulanger in Edmonton is obviously really raising the profile of architecture, and having a city architect would really be helpful. We've never had one. A robust planning office does wonders. We have 15 people in Winnipeg's planning department versus Edmonton is about the same size city, has 115 people. And so for them to produce a infill guideline was, you can imagine how robust it is compared to in other places where that's being invested to. So it's essentially investment of people, resources, foresight, voting in people who care, and then all of us as a community, as designers who understand the issues, is getting involved in politics, running for office, for God's sake. Like, let's do it.
Just a footnote on city architect. I brought Carl Boulanger, the city architect of Edmonton, with the help of the RIC, brought him to Vancouver. We had meetings with city council, with senior planners, development community, etc. Tried really hard to get a role like that here. I hate to say it, everyone was scared shitless. The developers didn't want a set of eyes or an intelligence at that level to comment on work. And the planners, just as much, did not want that. So it died at inception. I hope one day we do have it. I'm too old now to apply for it, but we really need a city architect. My colleague in Los Angeles, Christopher Hawthorne, went from being the architecture critic in the LA Times to being city architect. He's done a good job. Okay, we have time for another final question or two.
It's not.
A motion.
No.
Middle houses project create enormous problem with parking. Enormous, hard to believe. It's already starting now. What do you think?
Yeah, this is probably the number one comment and concern that people have about densification is where are all the cars going to go? And I have two responses to that. One that is more measured, which is really that as we develop our policies, our Broadway plan, our transit-oriented areas plans, we do need to ensure that infrastructure is built alongside. That means both transit infrastructure, grocery stores, daycare, schools. One without the other does not create a robust city. So that is my sort of political stance on it, that you're absolutely right. If we're not going to be allowing for space for cars, we have to allow for infrastructure for public transit, good public transit at all areas of our city. We can name a bunch of other cities in the world that have robust transit systems where people don't drive. I personally believe that space for people is more important than space for cars. But I do recognize that when we're talking about issues of seniors aging in place, when we're talking about people with mobility issues, that there needs to be acknowledgement of that cars are needed. I think I admire so much Johanna's work in policy making. I try and do a little bit of it myself. I'm not nearly as active as she is. I used to think that architecture could solve all the problems, and a lot of the times, I think we still can, and I still continue to advocate for all of these very important changes to make a full city. But the truth of the matter is we're architects, like we design buildings. We can see what the problems are through that process, but without robust policy change to support resilient, fully functioning cities, we can only kind of make the best out of what we've got. And maybe that sounds trite and I don't know, maybe sometimes when I say that it sounds a little bit like I've given up, but I also feel like we are at a sea change. Like I really see it, I think we're really going to see a lot of change in terms of critical mass in Vancouver, in terms of housing our most vulnerable population who really need it, and in terms of providing secure market rental housing and changing our attitudes around transit-oriented developments, around renting, around access to public space.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. One last question, anybody? A couple of hands were up. Front row? Yeah.
I just wondered with the parking thing, because I live downtown and half the parking spaces are empty. A lot of us have just given up on a car. I mean, now we got all this space in the ground. There's an opportunity for someone to come in and redesign what that space to be used.
Well, I'll take that more as a comment than a question. I'd like to thank you all for coming. We have to get Johanna back to her board duties at RIC at the Wall Center, so we have to wrap it up for now. I urge any of you, especially those of you who in practice doing housing, don't waste this opportunity. Grab a copy of the book. It's published in Mexico. It may not be the easiest book to find. Grab a copy upstairs. Johanna and Sasa will stay around for a few minutes to sign them. Please do that. And I'd really like to thank our amazing speakers tonight, Marianne Amodio, Johanna, not least, Sasa, Radulovic, and Indy. Thank you. Okay, Johanna, there's a little table just at the top of the stairs. And then, okay.